Um, Thanks for having me. Thanks for being interested in what I'm interested in, uh, and thanks to your team. Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Alan, and thanks, Ann, for the work. That there's a good bit of back end, as you're aware, that goes into putting all these chairs where they. Um, the So my name's Chris Crolley, and I am a boat captain, and I'm also the newly elected mayor of Allendale. And I never thought I'd see that day. And but I live adjacent to Cape Romaine National Wildlife Refuge, and the kind of unchecked development that was going on in the town of Allendale was very concerning and disconcerting. And at some point, I had to make the decision to either sit by and watch it or get in the game and try to change the score. And I do. I'm learning a lot about municipal government. I know, right? Like if you want to run for office, you should call me first. Um, but I do believe that I'll be able to I believe that this movement, this effort will be able to positively affect the class one wilderness in Cape Romaine. I do feel certain that a building moratorium and the proper ordinances imposed in that interim changes the way that planned developments can do septic and wetlands and lighting and trees and density. And that's all happening. So here about Allendale, I feel pretty good about that. The so how's it sound? Does everybody hear all right? It's not, it's kind of obnoxious from here. So I have a daughter and her name is Emily. I have two daughters, Emily and Olivia. And Emily, you need somebody like Emily in your life because she is an unfiltered truth teller. And she doesn't know another way. That's just her way. Her middle name is Forrest. So Emily Forrest, but we didn't name her Forrest because we're hippie like that. That's her grandmother's maiden name, which is from the Swedish Skog. When they came in through Ellis Island, they were like, "What's your name?" They said Skog. Well, that means forest in Sweden. So she is Emily Forrest, and Emily is feral. Like she's like not like Carrie, like her mom, but more like me. And so we'll be outside all the time, and Emily will have something that she wants to bring inside to live inside. Like a frog or a lizard or a butterfly, poor butterfly, or whatever is witless enough to be captured by him. And so I always tell her, I say, Emily, this creature is more beautiful outside, in its wild habitat. And so we'll sometimes keep it overnight. She went to school today with a wiggly moth, sphinx moth nymph. So she captured that. Metamorphosis is the word of the day. So I had a presentation much like this to do in the upstate, and it was this very nice neighborhood, very, very nice neighborhood in Greenville County. And as it worked out, I brought Emily, who I call Shorty, with me. And I can't call her Shorty forever because she grows in her sleep, but she's 7. And I brought her with me it was in a beautiful little church in this beautiful community. And afterwards, as we were riding back to where we were staying, I said, Shorty, how did you like that? Was that okay? And she's been with me on boats and seen the dolphins, and it's very exciting. And she goes, Dad, you're better outside. She goes, like in your wild habitat. And I know that's true. I know that's true. So at the podium, I'm going to do my best at the podium for you. And I have some podium experience, but do those of you who have been on a coastal expedition and been with me in a boat, you know what sort of improv and magic is involved. When I'm in a room like this, when I'm inside, I kind of miss my star player. I kind of miss that interaction with Mother Nature and that improvisational wonder that happens when you are introduced to Earth. And that's the disclaimer. So Coastal Expeditions and the Coastal Expeditions Foundation, in 1992, Coastal Expeditions was founded, and we were a 501c3. We were like determined to make a living doing it, and we were not great at it. People would say, are you a nonprofit organization? We'd be like, not by choice. But we were always a service organization, and doing litter sweeps and creek sweeps and scholarshiping for access and things like that. And finally, in 2017, when Crab Bank Island washed away due to the Hurricane Irma, I had been talking to Madeline McGee, like once a year. I talked to Madeline, who is the head of the South Carolina Association of Nonprofits. And we'd get to a certain point at lunch, and I would say, "Oh yes, that's why I'm not going to do it, be a nonprofit." But when Crab Bank washed away, it was sort of the catalyst that sent 2017 that sent us finally into what is probably the final iteration of Coastal Expeditions, which is the Coastal Expeditions Foundation. And we're a 501c3, but the tricky part, and like maybe one of the smartest things that ever happened for me in a business from a business perspective, is the S Corp is still happening, right? It's still generating income, like sort of like a capital machine that sits behind the forward-facing foundation and pays the bills of the foundation. And what that means is that whenever we get a donation, 100% of the donate, like if you donate $1 to the Coastal Expeditions Foundation, 100 pennies goes towards whatever the donation is for, whether it's turtles or birds or access. And I'm like, wow, what a great situation. What a great situation. So that's sort of the structure of the coastal. This should count a slow burning to me. So you'll see it says Coastal Expeditions 1992, but then that's Coastal Expeditions Foundation. And I just thought I would explain what's going on there. So here's what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about Earth. We're going to start about 4.3 billion years ago and bring it up to present, and see how that relates to Deveaux Bank. We are going to talk about birds, which is my favorite. I hope you're into birds. I was visiting with Anne in the parking lot, and we were trying to have a discussion, and I couldn't keep her attention because and it was just laughing gulls, like nobody woke up this morning and like, man, I hope I see a laughing gull today. Yeah, and another one, but I love that slow birding. Birds are some of the most beautiful, as form follows function and their evolutionary advantages over time. Birds are among the most beautiful creatures on Earth. And I believe that's true. It is an interesting hobby. I read the other day, just the day before yesterday, that birders are smarter than other people. It's a jury, obviously, right? And better looking. Most of you, but it was something about the cognitive act of observing and identifying that's good for your brain, and it keeps your brain going. It's not unknown to the scientific world that you outside are healthier than you inside, right? Like that's like a brain science proven thing in many different realms. So what we do at the Coastal Expeditions Foundation is introduce Earthlings to Earth, right? Like that's what it boiled down. It like came out of my mouth one day, and the guy was like, "Yes, that's it. You're introducing Earthlings to Earth," and then it's hatchlings, like baby sea turtles, fledglings, baby birds, and then Earthlings, like you. Welcome to Earth. How many turtle people? We got some turtle. Nod your head for turtles. Love the turtles. So they said we do a lot of turtle work in Cape Romaine, like a lot of turtle work in Cape Romaine, where all the turtles nest. So the last year, all the wildlife biologists I was in touch with were like, this is gonna be the year. This is gonna be, it wasn't. You know what they're saying this year? They said, this is gonna be the year. But last year there were 1,610 turtle nests inside Cape Romaine. And the foundation, for instance, yeah, wow. The foundation, for instance, pays the all of the biologists and then provides 3 interns and then gets them the stuff they need to do it. So, so like for instance, Isle of Palms and Sullivan's Island on a 10-year average will get 60 nests a year on average, sometimes more, sometimes less. Cape Romaine will get 60 nests in a day. And 1,610 was a low, slow year. They may break the record this year. Like if they get 4,000 nests, that'll be, but just that little like, shout out to my turtle people. I'm a spectrum optimist, so I also think this is going to be a big year. I think it's going to be a big year, and it'll be big for you here. So what's your favorite bird? Pick one. You can change it. It doesn't matter. You can just, yeah, oyster, it can be oyster catcher today, it can be something else tomorrow. Mine is a black skimmer. I just think those birds are just so exquisite. They're just so jet fighters, you know, and the way they do their thing, and they're just so unusual as birds on Earth. But yours can be a blue jay or a mockingbird. It could be something, you know, it could be like something slower. The I asked that question to a group that I was talking to from a resiliency program with Furman University. And I was like, are there any birders in the room? And they were all young executives. And one lady in the back like raised her hand like this, but not like this. It was just that one lady. And I was like, you know about birds, right? I mean, you've heard of birds, right? And they're like, yeah. And I said, well, how long do you think it would take you if every bird in the world disappeared right now? How long do you think it would take you to notice? You know? And it was a rhetorical question, sort of just a thought question. I tell you, it would take us, you know, we'd have to get up and go outside, I'll tell you that. But we'd notice. But and then the one guy was from Atlanta. We're like, sir, where are you from? Atlanta. And he said he'd think it'd take him about a couple hours or whatever. And I said, what if it was a pelican? And he was like, yeah, we only come to the coast every other year because we go to the mountains. But again, a thought question. We would know, right? What if it was a grouse or a condor? I don't think I'd know. I've never seen a condor. I'd like to. But anyway, I was trying to introduce them to the concept of birds. And I asked, okay, so nobody likes birds. And then I said, who likes dinosaurs? And everybody loves dinosaurs. And everybody agreed they like dinosaurs. And I was like, well, there's a connection. Because Earth hasn't always been as you know it. Right? Like Earth is like 4.3 billion years old, apparently. And one of my favorite authors, John McPhee, who's a geologist, he wrote Encounters with the Arch Druid and Annals of a Past World. But he said, if you stretch your arms out like this is how long Earth has been around, right? And if you take an emery board, stuff it across your fingernail, that's how long we've been here, right? 0.007% of the time. But I hooked these guys with the idea of dinosaurs. And I said, did you know that 66 million years ago, a meteor came hurtling into Earth's atmosphere and slammed into the Yucatan Peninsula and extincted all the dinosaurs? So sorry, now you dinosaur lovers, that's what happened to the dinosaurs. That was the end of the dynasty of the dinosaurs. They were around for a long time. They were around like much longer than we're expected to be around, especially if we keep acting like we're acting. But that was the end of the dinosaurs. And the dinosaurs were extincted that day, you know, like they were extincted that day. And it wasn't heating, it was cooling. And that gave rise to the mammals. But there was one category of dinosaurs that survived You know what those were? The birds, right? Not just the birds, but the seabirds, right? Not the neotropical migrants, you finch lovers. It was the seabirds, the what I know, right? You forward files. It's the birds that can make a living out to sea. They can fly and live on the wing, water, and feed from the ocean. And those are the birds. So all of today's birds. So you all have a bird book. If you don't have a bird book, just like pretend. Oh yeah, a bird book. And like call it, say like, oh, it's a Peterson, something like that. Say something real birdy. I got the Sibley's or something. The Nat G is always a good one. But if you look at the way those books are set up, if you look at the very first birds in the book, what do you see? It's the seabirds, right? The loons and auks and pelicans and cormorants and terns. And if you look in the back of the book, you're going to find the neotropical migrants, the new birds, the birds that came into existence as Earth just like calmed down a little bit and became a place where the gymnosperm plants gave way to the angiosperms with beautiful flowers and luscious fruits. And most bird books are set up that way, sort of chronologically as birds inhabited Earth. So these birds have made it through what's called the fifth great extinction. If you haven't seen the book by Elizabeth Colbert called The Sixth Great Extinction, you should look for it. It can be profoundly depressing. But I found a way to take hope from it, and I'll explain to you why. For instance, the most sophisticated creature on Earth once upon a time was a jellyfish, and jellyfish had a pretty good run too. But as the Earth aged and things began to happen and climate change and a lot of volcanic activity and things like that, eventually we worked through a number of extinctions and got to the fifth great extinction, which was the last one, again, 66 million years ago. And now here we are today, and it might startle you. It would certainly startle you to know that the arboreal bird populations, the little birds we love, their populations are down like 30%. Did you know that? Like in my lifetime, 55. In my lifetime, the woodland grassland birds, their populations are down by 30%. That's a lot, right? That's a lot. And it should startle you. It should also startle you to know that in the last 30 years, that seabird and shorebird populations have declined by 70%. What? 70, sorry that you have to know that, but I know it, and now you know it. And you don't have to trust me. Google it. You can see you don't really know me. But the of our time on Earth, the Homo sapiens, that's all the Earthlings, have been around. How long have we been around on Earth as Homo sapiens? That's right, about 300,000 years, if you give yourself some credit. Right now, the hominids in general have been around for a lot longer, a couple million years, like Homo habilis, like 2.8 million years of hominids, but Homo sapiens, us, have been around for something like 300,000 years. And that is and that's a fairly short time, as we talked about in the history of Earth. As we moved about the planet, and Elizabeth Colbert in her book covers this, it was the great human migration, the sort of out of Africa, started about 60,000 to 100,000 years ago. And we began to figure out how to make it across large bodies of water. And every time we showed up somewhere, what happened next was an extinction event, right? Like especially the big land mammals. Right? The big land mammals would go extinct. Like when they rolled up on North America, when we rolled up on North America, the giant sloths and the mastodons were soon to be extincted. And it wasn't because like you and I were like rolled up over the hill one day and saw a herd of mastodons and we're like, we're going to kill every one of those suckers. It wasn't like that. It was like, I bet those are delicious. Let's try one, you know? So we took one, right? And that was a lot, you know? And then the next year we took another, you know? And the year after that, took another one. And over a couple of 100 years, given that those large mammals take forever to reach sexual maturity, and then when they do procreate, they give an inordinate amount of care to their young, and they don't, and they only have one at a time, and hope that one makes it. You got kids? Are they still on the payroll? Mammal, right? The it's not common internal gestation on Earth, right? That's a mammal thing. Like most sensible creatures have learned to lay eggs. So over over a long amount of time, over a couple of 100 years, you end up extincting the mastodons just because you took one a year over a long amount of time. And that's where I found the book, the sixth extinction, very hopeful, because I'm a bird guy, and birds reach sexual maturity pretty quick, right? They don't care for their young that long. They have multiple young. They'll nest a couple of times in a season, and I think that all speaks well for the birds, right? The bird recovery. It doesn't speak well for, like, if you're a right whale, I'm like, man, dang. Or like a manatee or something like that, some kind of endangered mammal. But I think the birds stand a chance. I really do. This Pangea, so you've heard of Pangea, the supercontinent? That was a big deal. It created the Appalachian Mountains. You guys know about the Appalachian Mountains? They're not tall, are they? They're short, right? They're like, it's hard to find 3,000 feet in the Appalachians, but they used to be some of the tallest mountains on Earth. They were as tall as the Himalayas, when they were new, and and you know where you find the tops of them now? The tops of the Appalachian Mountains on the beach, right? Like, you summit some of the tallest mountains that have ever existed when you go out and bird steward, and you go out and protect the red knots, for example. Like, if you take a handful of that sand and take out the shell material, the calcium carbonate, you've got feldspar, quartz, mica, and mesocyte, and all the things that make up the composite rock of granite that was driven, 10,000 feet in the air and better, when the continents collided. That was old Pangea. New Pangea is that we've connected continents in ways that's never happened before. Right? This is the first time in the history of Earth that there's been this, like, some would argue, the crown jewel of animal evolution is your prefrontal cortex. Like, you ever like get there at some point where you know that you know that you know. That's Homo sapiens. Only you do that. But my point is that when you see large declines in populations, like 70% over 30 years, that's the hallmark of a great extinction. So that's what it means, right? If you can count up to 5, then what comes after 5? 6. And the 6th one is the one that we're witnessing now. But it's the first time in the 4.3 billion year history of Earth that there was a creature on the planet, an earthling. You're not the only earthlings, all the creatures are earthlings, that was aware of it, right? And that's the story I was telling in 2025. And then I would just apologize to everybody that had to hear it and go, like, sorry, but now you have to know that burden of knowing, the burden of knowing. But what it missed was, but what are we going to do about it? There was no action step, it was just the burden of knowing. And now you know that you know that you know. The coast of South Carolina, so hold on to that thought. We'll come back to that. We'll revisit that. The coast of South Carolina is riddled with rivers. We have more estuary than any other state, more rivers running into the ocean. delivering those mountaintops to the sea. And there are 5 major nesting islands for the seabirds and shorebirds, and some of the long-legged birds too, like the herring group. And one of them is down here at the Savannah River. It's called Tompkins Island. Tompkins Island was built. The royal terns love it. If you can keep the predators off of it, thousands of royal terns will nest there. And it was completely man-made, horseshoe-shaped island, and it was a mitigation project for deepening the Savannah River. So we built this island as a mitigation effort for allowance to disturb the benthic layer of the Savannah, and so we know that can be done. And then if you area here, you get to the northwest. This is the one. This is where Deveaux is. This thing is very bright. The that's much more tame. The and Deveaux we're going to come back to and talk about why Deveaux is the most miraculous of all of the bird nesting islands, and why the success of seabirds and shorebirds may well depend on how we behave, knowing what we know about Deveaux. But there's the northwest. So there, you go just a little bit further up, and you get to where the Kiowa River meets the Stono River, Bird Keystona, right there, and that's a great one because they read and they still sand at Bird Keystona, so Stono gets some sand, right? So Tompkins has to be maintained for a certain amount of time, not long enough probably. And Stono gets sand because of the nourishment of the People Beach that it's adjacent to. And then Crab Bank Island, the one that was such a very important process for me, we'll talk about, is right there in Charleston Harbor, right out of Shin Creek, right at the mouth of Shin Creek. And that's a very important one. That was rebuilt due to the post-45 harbor deepening project. When they were deepening Charleston Harbor, they found some beneficial dredge spoil, and they literally built a bird nesting island where birds were nesting. They're killing it. The black skimmers are killing it. Their pelicans came back late last year. Oyster catchers nest on the perimeter. There's lots of great stuff going on in Crab Bank. And then the one that you may not know about is Maine National Wildlife Heritage. And this is Francis Marion National Forest. Look at that. That's a lot of conserved land corridor. If you live in between those two things, there's a stewardship responsibility. You're going to want to have a really good mayor. But it's all in double. But Marsh Island is right there in Bulls Bay. And I don't know if you've ever been to Bulls Bay before, but if you have and you didn't know what you were doing, I bet you did what I did and ran aground. And Marsh Island is one of the most diverse. It is one of the most out there. It's one of the hardest to get to. And it has things nest on Marsh Island, don't nest other places, and it's going away quickly. Right? It's going because of did you hear the sea levels are rising? They are. I'm out there every day. I see it. There was once upon a time people that didn't, that wanted to challenge that and say, no, they're not. But yes, they are. It's the people that say that they're not rising are being referred to as science intolerant. So I thought that was kind of funny. The question, what they wanted to debate was why, why. So there they are. And if you heard 3 of the 5 are contingent on other projects like the Harbor Deepening Project, the Savannah Deepening Project, and the nourishing the park on Valley Beach. And the one that we are here to talk about is this one. This is Deveaux. And Deveaux used to be 400 and something acres. And we're totally watching it dwindle and watching it go away and watching Deveaux dissipate into 14 acres or something. I don't know, but it seems like it gets smaller and smaller every time I go out there. But the birds are still going to pack in there and they're still going to nest there. The pelicans are going to be get up on the next pelican. The skimmers are not going to be able to nest there because it's a walkover. They'll try. There used to be a lot of skimmers nesting there. The least terns will not be able to nest there because it also washes over. But I think we'll have some good pelican production and those dang laughing gulls as well. Now, the neat thing about Deveaux and what makes it superlative and something that you should be aware of, and you probably are, is that something happens on Deveaux in the springtime that's being heralded by all of the heralders as the most significant avian discovery in the last 100 years. And it has to do with a certain bird. What's that bird? And everybody said, Wimbro. That's good. That's good. I thought for a second there, I thought I was going to get an amen. But 20,000 Wimbro descend on Deveaux, right? And this is sort of like the poetry of it and the beauty of it. And they come at sunset, and it's a full moon sort of thing. And it's just gorgeous. And if you haven't seen it, you should see it. And the Coastal Expeditions Foundation does run trips at the request of DNR during this big Wimbrel migration. After all of them get here that are coming, before any of them that have come leave, we run a couple of trips on some big boats and try to educate. Wow. If you go down the rabbit hole online and look for Wimbrel on Deveaux, there's some magnificent footage. Cornell Lab has some magnificent footage of this bird discovery. The beauty of it is amazing, and the interplanetary connection, the continental connection, is also worthy of note. They're tracking these birds to see where they're going, and where they're coming from, and what they do once they get here, right? And it's a fascinating story of where they go. I don't want to talk too much about Wimbrels, but you can't really this day and age talk about Deveaux and not talk about Wimbrel. This is what I love, is where they're coming from. And you see the majority of the local population is here in sort of southern South or northern South America. Look at that. That's here. And then they know where they're coming from, where they're going. That's where they nest, and they've got those long downward curved beaks, and they're perfect for eating fiddler crabs. You guys know about fiddler crabs? They don't stand a chance against a Wimbrel, and then when they get to the savannas where they nest, these long grasslands, there's a circadian protein bloom of grasshoppers, and they got grasshoppers like we have fiddler crabs, and those beaks, turns out, are perfect for eating grasshoppers. So Wimbrels, we got 20,000 birds descending. If you'd like to go, I can get you there. The opportunity exists. One of the most important birds that nests on Deveaux, though, is one of my favorites, and that is the eastern brown pelican. And this is a great look at sort of a diverse rookery. You've got a lot of royal terns there. You've got a lot of brown pelicans there as well. That was sort of the purpose of the slide, was to show a variety of birds on the. There's your laughing gull, Ann. You see that? What was my point though? Oh yes, pelicans. Pelicans. You'll know the answer to this question. True or false? Pelicans are previously endangered. True. That's true. Pelicans are previously in danger. In the late 1960s, early 1970s, pelicans almost went extinct. If you've ever been to Louisiana, and look at their state seal, like that wasn't why you went to Louisiana, but I know. But they have a pelican on their state seal, and pelicans went extinct in Louisiana. Like all of the pelicans in Louisiana were brought in from Mississippi, right? Like, wouldn't that be terrible if like all our pelicans were from Mississippi? I'd have to move. But nothing against Mississippi. Are you from Mississippi? Oh, sorry then. Like Mississippi, I guess. In any event, The you'll know the answer to this question. There was a lady that helped save the pelican. She was critical. She was sort of the poet laureate, the writer that helped save the pelican. What was her name? Rachel. And that's good. That was more of an amen. And then everybody said Carson. That's right. And this is a good one too. You'll know this one. What was the name of her book? Silent Spring. Silent Spring. That's right. And then and she released that book in 1962. And she addressed Congress in 1963. And we've established that municipal processes take a long time, right? And she addressed Congress. What she addressed Congress about was the elixirs of death. And one of them was, there were like 7 of them, but they were completely uncontrolled pesticides, poisons. And the only thing you had to have to spread these poisons on the ground crops was the money to buy. There was no permission. There was no oversight. You just could buy them, put them all over everything. And they're great pesticides. Like DDT is a fantastic pesticide. And really what makes it so good is it's so, it lasts forever, right? It never goes away. I had a scientist tell me one time, he was like, as a matter of fact, you have traces of DDT in you right now. That is some scary thing to think about. So Rachel Carson, Silent Spring, 1962, 1963. Rachel died in 1964. When she addressed Congress, she was suffering from breast cancer. And God bless her for doing that. In 1970, the year I was born, they invented the Environmental Protection Agency. And they banned all of these elixirs of death. Right? And something was done about them. There was somebody paying attention all of a sudden. And given a chance, because they're not giant land mammals, the pelicans came back. They're no longer endangered, right? They're no longer threatened. Right? The eastern brown pelican, Pelicanus occidentalis, was almost like done, like the dodo bird or the ivory-billed woodpecker or the Carolina parakeet, right? Like gone, just gone. Could you imagine that? Like, I guess we wouldn't really know. But I think that that's important to remember Rachel Carson, because when I say to groups that aren't sort of like of our vintage, who is Rachel Carson? They go, never heard of, not even the teachers, right? You ever heard of a book? What's the name of the book? Book. Is it online? Can I get it on my Spotify or whatever? And so I will mention Rachel Carson and the Silent Spring every time I get a chance to talk about pelicans, because I think it's important to remember. I also believe in some sort of reincarnation, which is not like I came back. I used to be a privateer swashbuckler. Like I was Sir Francis Drake and now live in Holland. Not like that, but like reincarnation of energy, reincarnation of movement, reincarnation of ideas. And I think that's okay. That doesn't make me weird. There will be an interruption of nesting on Deveaux. It's just getting smaller and smaller. And here's the thing is we saw that happening. And my dear friend Dana Beach is a Deveaux fanatic. Like he wrote the best book ever written about Deveaux. It's peerless. There's literally no other book. So Dana wrote the best one. He loves that. And he loves you guys. But we saw this thing going on. So we hired some engineers from Coastal Science Engineering, a guy named Patrick Barano. The foundation underwrote the project and promised and made promises and made sure it was happening. And so we're waiting for the first phase engineering to come back. And meanwhile, backtracking, the Crab Bank project, that's old Crab Bank. And this will make sense, just hang out with me for a second. the old, it was not a done deal. It wasn't like, hey, the bird nesting island went away, rebuild it, right? They were like, uh, no, we're taking all of the dredge spoil offshore and dumping it out there. I'm like, but why don't you just rebuild this bird nesting island? They're like, well, Mr. Crowley will be happy to rebuild that bird nesting island. I was like, great, let's do it. And they said, that'll be $4.2 million. And they said, no, it's going to be expensive. And I said, I know people. And they said $4.2 million. I was like, I don't know any of those people. But they did say $4.2 million. And I was like, well, all hope is lost. And then they said there's a CAP 204 program will cover, the Army Corps of Engineers will cover 60% of the cost. And I was like, I might know those people. And we got the cost down to like 2.3 or something like that. And the cash call was like, here's crazy. The cash call was on my birthday. And we weren't making it. Like the best donation we got was for like $162.37 from the bake sale at Moultrie Middle School. Right. It was, but that's, we got a small group of, informed, committed people, and we were trying to make a difference. We're trying to change the world. And Boeing, South Carolina made a donation. The State Ports Authority made a donation. BP made a donation. SCD&R was all into it. We were raising funds with the Coastal Conservation League and the Audubon, South Carolina. And and we were still short. We had applied to NIFWIF, still not heard back from NIFWIF. And I was like, I had everything in place. I'd taken a second mortgage on my house. And Carrie does not know that to this day. But she should, I should tell her. But is this film? This is being filmed. Any event, they postponed the deadline. They had a bid dispute. The NIFWIF grant came through for $750,000, more money than we needed. The bid came through. You know what the bid came through at on a $2.3 million guess? It's like less than $400,000. Right? Here's how you know you're doing the right thing. When you're sitting around with a group of conservationists, a group of dirt worshiping tree huggers going, what are we going to do with all this extra money? Right? And it was obvious what needed to be done. We started a fund that was the Coastal Bird Conservation Fund. That's an interest-bearing trust fund that's administered by Felicia Sanders, the great, at the Department of Natural Resources. Can't say enough good things about Felicia Sanders. She is so good, and her team. And we also did access. We provided education. But my point is that the Crab Bank experience was what shaped my opinion of what needed to be done for Deveaux. I was like, hey, the sand we need to renourish this island is right there. Pick it up and put it back on top. Like, it's all around it. Like, if you've ever been out there, let's go kayaking. I'll show you the sand. It's right here. It's right here. Just pile it back up, like we did Crab Bank. It'll be great. And so this is next slide will prove to you that I'm not an egotist. But I took those boat trips out for the Wimbrels and I was proselytizing. I was like, rebuild Deveaux, pile the sand back up. Like all the money's being spent on people beaches, and they're rebuilding Daytona right now. It's going to cost $1 billion, and no money's being spent on wild beaches. We need to rebuild the beach. And I was like that. I was just like, could I get a hallelujah? And I didn't know that Tony Bartlemay from the Post and Courier was on the boat. And I got a call from my friend that was like, dude, have you seen the paper? It's a Sunday paper. She was like, you're on the front page of the Sunday paper. I was like, what? And she was like, above the fold. Like, that's a thing. It was above the fold. So that's the picture. I wish I had those glasses back. Those were some like really good. But that was the picture on the Varnays, French. but that was the picture on the front page of the Sunday paper, and that was me going, rebuild Deveaux. We got to put the sand back on Deveaux. It's just like we did Crab Bank. This is Crab Bank, and we won Crab Bank. You know, it's a major thing. The most important work we'll have a chance to take part in our lifetimes. You know, this is some of the most important work, and that's what I was doing. And then and then on that boat, we pulled back in. It was a full moon sunset thing, so we pulled back into the dock at Cherry Point, and which is, we make it look easy. It's like the current ripped through there, especially on a big boat like that, and if it's windy a little bit. But I was there, and I was helping people off the boat, and I was just exhausted from preaching the gospel. And this elderly lady was on the boat, and she was like one of those. She was like my grandma, like Annie Lee Crowley, and she, you know, she could have been 70 or she could have been 100. And she was there with her nephew that was helping her around. And I was there helping people on the dock, helping people off the boat so they didn't slip. And this woman's name was Maybank. Her name was Miss Maybank. And she got, I'm gonna try to get through this part of the story because this happened to me and it was important. But I helped Miss Maybank off the boat, and she held my hand in her my grandma's hand, and she didn't let it go. And I looked at her in the eyes, and this wise woman, and she said, "You know, son, Hurricane David took Deveaux Bank away in 1979." And I was like, "Yes, ma'am, I do know that. I do know that." And then she said, "The Lord rebuilt Deveaux." And I was like, she had tingling or chills or something. And I was like, well, Miss Maybank, when you do what I do, it's going to take a miracle to succeed. And I believe, and I'm available for that. I said, I'm available for that miracle. And then she was done, left. And I was just like, whoa, what was that? What just happened there? Meanwhile, I'll never forget that moment. Meanwhile, the first phase engineering came back. And Patrick had the plan. He showed it to me, like I was privileged to see it before anybody else because I was really involved in the funding of it. And I don't know how, but that's the deal. And he goes, here are the findings. He said there's an offshore bar sitting outside the North Edisto Inlet, and they mapped the inlet. They dove, they sent sensors. It was real engineering science. And he said that offshore bar that's building is continuing to build. He goes, Deveaux, as you know it, is going toward Botany Island. And I was like, well, what about putting sand on it? He was like, you can put all the sand you want to on Deveaux, and it's all going to Botany Island. So if I had had my way, if I'd have been able to wave my magic wand or convince somebody to spend $10 million to put a bunch of sand on Deveaux, it would have been $10 million down the drain, moving, driven by the longshore current and the dynamics of the North Edisto. And I didn't have the science, I had the romance, but that's why scientists don't like me. They don't, because I'm a storyteller. But he said there's an underwater sand wave. I said, what? He said there's an underwater sand wave, and it's moving from that offshore bar at a rapid pace, geologically rapid pace. And he said Deveaux is going to rebuild itself. And I was like, are you, I said, are you sure? And he goes, this is what an engineer said, a scientist said, I couldn't be more sure. unless I had a time machine. And I was like, I believe in time machines. And I said, oh my God, the Lord is going to rebuild Devoux. The Lord is going to rebuild Devoux. And like, namaste, like, that's the thing. And then, and so Dana, meanwhile, we had already applied for the second phase. We had worked hard, like we had kissed some butt to get the second phase engineering done for Devoux. Like we were waiting for the first. What happens is you get in the pipeline, you get the first phase done, and it says, here's what's going on with the dynamics. Here's some possible solutions. Second phase is, here's what funding it's going to take. Here are the permits, and if you're depending on what you're going to do. So we were like, had already applied through the South Carolina Office of Resilience to get the second phase engineering. Right? Turns out Lord's going to rebuild Devoux, and Miss Maybank was right, and that was so critical. And then the second phase engineering got approved through NIFWF, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation grant. And the SCORE, the South Carolina Office of Resilience, was who we partnered with to get that done. And they were like, all right, second phase, we're ready to fund some, coastal science engineering. And I was like, oh yeah, Lord's gonna rebuild Devoux. That's not gonna be necessary. And they were like, they were just honest, they were like, WTF. They were like, what? But I thought you said, I was like, yeah, like time machine. He said time machine. And it's so then there are two things that I think should be you shouldn't be able to say. And one is what the Army Corps said when I said rebuild Crab Bank, and they said, no, we got to haul it offshore because it's the least cost alternative. And I'm like, don't ever say least cost alternative like that. I don't love it. And the other one is what SCORE said when I said we weren't going to need the second phase engineering. They said, we'll just give the money back. I was like, no. And they were like, we'll just give the money back. And I was like, I really had to like communicate with them and like try to convince them. And it was just like a no, no, no. And then finally on the last ditch effort, I said, let me rewrite the grant. Just give me a chance. Let me rewrite the grant. And then got all the way up the chain. He was like, all right. I said, it's on me now. I'll rewrite the grant. And I had Dana over here that was like, let's rewrite the grant. And then so it's like, and it's on me. I'll deal with NIFWF, and we'll see. All they can say is no. And he was like, all right, stop it. You get a chance to rewrite the grant. And then so we got permission to do it. And then Dana was like, good luck with that. I'm going to Africa. So like, damn. So long story short, we did rewrite the grant. And they said, okay, but you had to base it on Devoux. So here's what's going on now. I don't know how many people know this, but more people are going to know it after tonight. We rewrote the grant. I rewrote the grant through the South Carolina Office of Resilience. And the idea is, where are the birds going to go while the Lord rebuilds Devoux? Right? Based on Devoux. It had to be based on Devoux. So we're going to look at Devoux, and we're going to know some things, and we're going to try to track and see where the birds go while Devoux is rebuilding itself, and this miraculous action that's going to happen on Devoux over time. We're going to see where they disperse and allow us to go to the other islands. We're going to build a database that's in cooperation with the DNR of man's interaction with birds over time, from the history of, it'll cover plume hunting, it'll cover conservation efforts, it'll cover Mark Catesby, Alexander Wilson, John James Audubon, man's activities with birds over time, specific to the South Carolina coast, all the way up to the current present moment, and what's happening now, and what can be done. And this is the action step for the burden of knowing. This is the, I'm just about finished. What needs to happen is we need to have a new culture around bird islands. We do need engineering, we do need permits, and we do need money. There's never, ever been a time that a bird nesting island, a wild beach, was renourished as a standalone project. Those activities are always beholding to something else that's going on, like the deepening of the Savannah, right? Like the dredging of the Charleston Harbor. The idea that once we get all the data in one place, the truth that once we get all the data in one place, once the website is built and there's a film being made, there's going to be a film adjacent to this project and a book with this NIFWIF grant that was supposed to be for phase 2 engineering, but we get to do something else with that money. We need to become, birds need, what we need to do in this Anthropocene, in this time we live in that's so heavily affected by us, is in this place in the world is build islands. We have to become island builders. And that is the action step. We need a fund that is dedicated to bird habitat, that when Marsh Island needs sediment, if it's $10 million, that it's there. You know, when the engineering proves that building an island in the Santee Delta is, you know, on an existing sandbar, that we can build an island there, that's going to happen. But it has to be cursory to the Army Corps of Engineers dredging the intercoastal waterway. We need to have standalone valid projects that have to do with bird nesting islands, because we love birds. I know. And I think that this is the moment that begins to happen. And what my plan is, and what I'd like for us to think about as a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens, is that this is the moment where we identify the problem, much like Rachel Carson did in 1962. It was easier then because the problem was the multi-billion-dollar international chemical lobby and their persistent product, right? When we look at the problem now, we identify that we're the problem. Because if we've been around for 300,000 years, you know how long pelicans have been around? That's right, 30 million years. You can find evidence of a pelican 30 million years ago, and they'd be happy to go to the next available nesting room, right? The birds are nesting on the roof, right? The least terns, you know where they're nesting? On the roof. Here's how you'll know that you're where they wanted to go and nest, is when they start nesting, right? And so I think we should build them, like, we don't have to live with that kind of guilt. Let's build them some islands. You know, let's become island builders. So once this bird project gets complete and it's on like an 18-month guide path, and it's the interagency transfer of the capital, the score kept a little bit, but $185,000 went, and it's being directed through the College of Charleston. And the College of Charleston is creating the film, doing the research, teaching the students, and doing all of that work with the film, the website, the data collection, and the Coastal Expeditions Foundation is the in-kind match, the in-kind sponsor, and we're doing the community engagement and the outreach and the trips and those sorts of things. And I know this is the right thing. And once we get it done, and once we've completed it, I'm going to take it to Washington. I'm going to get in front of the Senate Appropriation Committee, just like Rachel Carson did. And we're going to get a fund that's dedicated to building habitat for seabirds and shorebirds. And hopefully, because they're not mammals, we can see a rebound. And our state, on the coast of our state, will be a model for how to care for seabirds and shorebirds in other places, not just on the coast of the United States. These birds connect us, continentally with cultures that we need to know more about. So, yeah, I'm going to close with a quote from the great social anthropologist, Margaret Mead. And she said, never doubt, you know this one, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Right? Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens, you don't even have to be like educated and hardworking, you know. Yeah, I mean, it's like a quantum entanglement. You know, just have to be thoughtful and committed, can change the world. And she goes on to say, in fact, it's the only thing that ever has. So thank you for your attention. That's my presentation.
For all that food for thought, I'm sure people have questions, so please just raise your hand.
Yes, sir.
The time frame between the destruction of what we now know as Deveaux Bank and then the new Deveaux Bank, Bank 2.2 version.
Yeah. So the North Edistone is very well studied, and the engineers said something like 5 to 7 years. 5 to 7 years. Right. That little Deveaux out there. And both of those Deveaux are state heritage preserves, thanks to Felicia Sanders. That means they're protected and you can't trespass them. Yes, sir. Yeah.
The phase we paid for largely by on close to $50,000 after the first phase.
Yes, that is right. Thank you for that. That is important. That's important. That's part of the story, I admitted, and it's a better story now. Another part of that story was I did say when we didn't need the phase 2 for Deveaux, I was like Marsh Island, everybody point toward Marsh Island, because there's phase 1 engineering on Marsh. We need phase 2, and that's I got a call on that tomorrow, and they were like, no, the grant says Deveaux. The grant says Deveaux, but your community was the major funder for that. All the Coastal Expeditions Foundation did was match the in-kind, the $25,000 in-kind contribution for community engagement and boat trips and things like that.
I have a question. What have you learned as you've looked at these? Is South Carolina at the forefront, or can we learn from other projects in Virginia or New Jersey or Delaware or anywhere where birds are using beach type areas?
There's birds are funny. Bird people are funny too. What's right for South Carolina isn't necessarily right for North Carolina or for Virginia. Like, we're so tidal. Like, they're building platforms, floating platforms, off the coast of Virginia, and like the common terns love it. But floating platforms don't work for us because we're too tidal, right? And there are a lot of things to think about. Like, we really need some science. I'll tell the story, and hopefully I'll include all the relevant things in the story. But the scientists that do the bird work are critical, because what you don't want to do is build a sink. Like, you don't want to build something that the birds go to and have zero production. Like, if it's predators or if it's tidal or something like that. So this is what, like, island building is what's right for our coast in certain places, right? But it's not right for every coast. But if every state had a fund to protect seabirds, what's right for their coast. If it's floating platforms in Virginia, then that's what they could fund. I think we're island builders. I think the island building potential is what's up. Other questions?
I think the birds, and we are lucky, we have people like this fighting for better solutions. So thanks for coming out tonight, guys.